Hi everyone, this is Grace, and today I'll be walking you through how I made this bridal shower set. So let's go. Now, I think it's important to understand that I did make this originally for an online class, and I just approach things a little bit differently when I'm making something for an online class versus like one of my shape series sets where I just go all out. When I'm doing an online class, no matter the skill level, I'm hyper focused when I'm creating the designs on putting something together that is streamlined, that's effective, that doesn't use certain like tools or extra decorations that are not necessary. I really want to make sure it's all adding value to the set. So this one I would consider advanced beginner / intermediate. It's pretty simple, but simple does not mean easy. If you've ever done royal icing cookies or really just about anything, but sometimes simpler is actually harder to make it look good because there are fewer things to focus on. So with the designs, I spent a lot of time figuring out which ones would be essential, and I think I came out to 7. It's like technically 6 cookie cutters, but 7 different designs, and I'll show you how I did the 7th one. First up, obviously, we have a wedding dress. Had to have the wedding dress. Keeping it simple with the aesthetic, the design here. We are doing white. I do color my white icing with white gel color. You could use a tiny bit of purple, like use a toothpick, but I'm always too scared to do that because I want my white icing to be white. So we let that first base layer crust just enough. And now going on with this simple line detail, you'll see kind of the recurring theme of simple lines throughout some of the designs. And then we're going to go in with our flower. And this is just a taste of the kind of flowers that are done in this set. And this is part of my like ethos design approach to this set, was that I wanted to do like a common theme for bridal showers, and florals are pretty good common theme. But then I didn't want to do florals the way that everyone does florals, which is like the traditional medium peak piping consistency, sometimes even a stiff peak, having to use piping tips. That kind of stuff ruins your hands quite quickly. And yeah, I just wanted to try something different. So this is another way to do florals, not something I came up with myself. I first learned this from Sweet Sugar Belle like 10 years ago. We'll go more in depth about the florals probably in the bouquet, which I think is the 3rd cookie I show you in this, but let's take some time to talk about this love plaque. So, okay, lots of things to talk about. I really hesitated on whether I should do any extensive lettering with this set or not, but you know, it's a bridal shower set. Like I feel like it's not a bridal shower set without some sort of lettering in it. So I do 2 different kinds here that are kind of as simplified as possible. I love doing more complicated lettering, especially on a hand lettered plaque like this, because the beauty of this plaque is that it was specifically designed to write the word love on it, right? So I'll talk a little bit more about the lettering when we get to it. Let's talk about this fuchsia here. So I don't know, to me it's a little deceiving that this is actually a rich, deep color. It requires a tremendous amount of pink and a touch of blue. I would actually recommend starting this color 2 days before you're going to start decorating, because that will give it a ton of time to develop. The last thing you want is way too much food coloring in your icing. It will ruin how it dries. It will color bleed, all the not fun stuff. So I think I used... I don't know if it matters if you use Wilton pink or Chef Master pink. The important thing though, the most crucial thing other than the color for this design, is you are going to just barely allow that base layer to crust. Now, depending on your environment, just barely crusting enough is anywhere from like 15 to 20 to 30 minutes. It really depends. Are you using a dehydrator? Are you using a fan? Is it really humid? Was your icing way too thin? The reason why we are putting this, or we're doing the second layer when the first layer has just barely crusted, is because we want to prevent craters in the letters. So actually, hot off the presses here, I recently learned something like last week, another technique to prevent craters, which actually I'm going to have to do, I think, at some point. So this is one method, which is to make sure your base layer has just barely crusted enough to be able to hold the weight of your second layer. But another method, well, and then I'm doing these lines here, which honestly, I don't find that the lines help all that much. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but I'm just doing it just in case. Something else other people do is it doesn't matter how, or another technique is to poke holes in the base layer of the icing before you put the second layer on top. And with that method, it does not matter how crusted your icing is. Like people are using floods that have dried overnight and then they're doing the second layer the next day and they're just poking holes in the base layer. And I'm just like amazed. And I definitely need to do this myself sometime to see how this works. But this is definitely a tried and true method if you're too scared to poke holes in your icing. Obviously, you poke the holes like below wherever you're flooding. The key to success here with this flooding these bars is one, well, other than the timing of putting it on the first layer, I like to flood the bars immediately after piping the lettering so that the outline is still a bit wet and you can really more easily like encourage the icing to the flood icing to kind of melt into the piping consistency. So that's one thing. Using the scribe here to really make sure that you're getting all of the icing into the nooks and crannies, super important. Then we let that crust nicely, and we're using our first bit of gold here. So I did use gold in this set because it is a bridal shower set, because gold is so often requested by brides. But I don't think you don't have to use gold in this for cost reason, time reason, whatever. Obviously, doing gold always takes more time. There are a couple more instances of gold in this set. I think if you wanted something different, if you didn't want to do gold, you could just leave the ring, honestly, white. It's a look. Or you could make it the peach color. That's another idea. So love this. This plaque actually is just supposed to be love, not like with the ring in it. I chose to put the ring in that to avoid having to do like the classic ring design that everyone does for a bridal shower that I honestly hate doing myself. So anyway, let's talk about this bouquet, because I feel like this bouquet is like the pièce de résistance of this entire set, or at least it's my favorite part. Okay, so the first thing I'm doing here is, instead of covering this entire base with stems, I wanted to have a more simple look, but also I didn't want to spend the time or my hand on piping a bajillion lines. So to cover up the space on the bottom, I just like use the same icing and then spread it across with my thingamajiggy, or you can use a knife, whatever you have. And then I sparsely placed those stems. I love the look of this. I think it goes with the aesthetic of the set. The set is like very big, bold, simple. And then for the flowers, so I chose not to outline the flowers because that's just not what I like to do. I like to fly by the seat of my pants. But if this makes you nervous, you could totally just take an edible marker and sketch out where you want to put all the flowers. I start with the 3 fuchsia ones. Then we go in with the big peach on the side. And then the peach on the bottom. And you want to make sure you cover the top of those stems. And then the pink Again, just like covering all of the tops of the stems, leaving room for the leaves that will go on the very edges. The important thing here is to make sure that none of the same colors are touching. It gets a little hairy on the upper right-hand corner. And then we go in and we flood immediately. Now, it is very possible that these flowers could crater. I do ask for a thick flood, I believe, for this set, which is like a thicker end of the flood. If you're using something that's too thin, it will very possibly, very likely crater. But the beauty, my friends, which you will see after we flood all of these, is the design element that we put on top of it. It will cover any crater. You know me, I love that kind of design. So we're gonna let that pink one's crust for like 10 to 15 minutes, just barely enough, so that then we can go in with the peach next to it. And it will, so this is the important one right here, making sure that those two peach ones don't actually touch, because we are hashtag lazy and want to make sure that we can do all the peach at the same time. Using that scribe to just kind of help things settle. Let that crust for another 10 to 15 minutes. Go in with our pink, just filling in all those gaps. I like how this bouquet looks, that it's different. Like they aren't all uniform. No two bouquets are going to look exactly the same. I personally like that. If that is not your aesthetic, I am not offended. You can change it up as you wish. So let those crust again. And then we go in with our soft peak piping consistency and we do the squiggle. Some people like to do the squiggle from the inside out. I prefer from the outside in. I don't know, my brain just works better that way. But do whatever works best for you. And you see here, if there's any cratering, it's going to get covered up, masked, distracted by these beautiful things here. And we love that for us. So yay. And then we go in with the pink. This pink is actually kind of hard to achieve because you want just barely enough color, right? Like you don't want to make it too saturated. And then we are going with the leaves, which is a medium peak and cut with a leaf tip on a tipless piping bag. You can see here I'm really struggling at this angle because I don't want to move the cookie. But this kind of piping you have to do at a 45-degree angle, at the correct angle. I know I keep saying angle. All right, so that is the that was the bouquet. Now we're going on to the first instance of the banner, and this is the one cookie cutter that gets used twice. And what I wanted to do here is to show you how wonderfully you can customize this particular cutter. So, yes. This is the most traditional way to use this cutter, which is to mark out all of the different flags. And I did use an edible marker just to kind of help me a little bit. I just want to pause and also note that if you can look at the cutter now, it's actually supposed to be bows on the end, but I decided not to do bows. I decided to do flowers, obviously. So we are using the squiggle technique to help prevent craters with these flags. I do find this technique works very well in this instance, in this particular shape. It's important with that squiggle that it's tight, that you don't have anything poking up, like really make it flush to the cookie, and that you give it kind of a border, that you like some space around it to kind of mimic the natural like concave. That's not what I'm thinking about. Dome. That's the word I'm looking for. The kind of natural dome aesthetic. Okay. So what else can we talk about here? Now, I did experiment with outlining these flags individually and like next to each other. So there was separation in between them naturally, but it looked good, but like honestly, not worth the effort. Okay. We are here to streamline and simplify, my friends. Even here, you don't even have to do the individual flags. It's a look, but obviously it takes more time. Something that's really important and effective to get like a good look on these flags is to make sure that you're using your scribe to get into all of those corners. Naturally, with the tip of your bag, you're just like not going to be able to get to those little corners, right? So let those crust again for like at least 10 to 15 minutes. This squiggle method, I do not let my squiggles dry. I think maybe some people do, but I don't. Because I just think it all needs to kind of like join together in harmonious matrimony. Oh man. Another thing to keep in mind is when you are flooding up next to the flag next to it, is to make sure you are just like what am I trying to say? Don't touch the flag next to it except with the icing. So let's see if we can watch this next one. So flooding right up next to it, ideally one and done. Like trying to fix a seam between icing is very hard with a scribe to get it to look good. You can see here, obviously, I have to go in there to the tips. Like so. And okay. Got lost. Let that dry for like more like 30 minutes just so those center flags crust a bit better. And then the white things on top are just like strings holding it together. And now we are writing bride. You could do like any 5-letter word is the bride's name, 5 letters. You could also do like a heart and then the initials or like the first letter of the bride and the groom or the bride and the bride or whatever it is. So like a heart and then G and then the center one is plus and then A and then another heart to fill out all 5. Whatever strikes your fancy. Now we're ultimately going to be painting these gold, which is why I did the lettering in pink. I'm of the personal perspective that the lettering, find my words here. There are a few different ways or ethos behind what color you should do the piping on top of the base layer that you're ultimately going to paint. Some people will do it like closer to the color of the paint, like a golden yellow if you're painting it gold. Some people will just do white. I like to do the color of the base flood so that if you are not perfectly painting the lettering, which like chances are you're not, anything that kind of peaks around the side or whatever is just going to blend in with the base layer. That is my personal preference. So you can see on the corners, we are covering what is supposed to be a bow with these cute little flower situations. Just doing the same kind of shindig that we did with the bouquet. Thank you, Grace. Doing the leaves here, a big one, a little tiny one. Getting real awkward with the angle here. I don't like to move the cookie for the sake of like, especially when this gets sped up, when the cookie is constantly moving, it's just like not a satisfying thing to watch. So now we're painting gold, and this gold is the Sugar Art Sterling Pearl in Wedding Gold mixed with their color solution. You can also use Everclear or a very high alcohol proof vodka. It needs to be a clear alcohol. The alcohol evaporates and what allows it to essentially dry. I do not know the magic sauce to like how much gold to liquid, to be totally honest. I always wing it. It's just what I do. And I use a pretty small paintbrush. Like, you don't want to use something too big, too long, too wide, whatever. And I try to do the lettering, the gold in one layer. Once you start getting into two layers, it can get a little messy and like clumpy. So that is the bride banner. And then we have the cake situation. So first up with the cake, we are working on the cake stand. So, I don't know, it's a word I tend to forget. Anyway, so cake stand is first outlining, and then outlining the bottom two layers of the cake. Now, something I love about this design and something I worked on with the cookie cutter maker, because this is a semi-custom set that I put together with the Sweet Design Shop. Hudit, Judith, she's amazing. So this is like a traditional 3-tier cake, but as you can see, I'm not actually covering the top tier. What? I know. So that top, well, I am covering the top tier. It's just not cake. It's going to be flowers to go with the theme of this set. Now, you could totally take this cake and not make that flowers. You could just make it a tier, whatever you want to do to make your heart happy. So for the cake stand here, we're actually going to crackle this and we are going to paint it. Now, paint it with gold. Whenever I paint a large section of gold, or really like any section of gold, as long as it's not something on top, like a second layer, like the bride that we painted, when it's something like the cake stand, I always try to do that first and then flood next to it. You can, flood the cake layer next to it and then do the crackle, but it's just a lot harder. It's very easy for the gold to bleed into the next section if you get too much liquid, if that makes sense. So I always like to paint the gold section first, because you can be pretty sloppy about it. Like, get it on the cookie next to it, doesn't matter, because you're just going to cover that with icing anyway. So we let this rest. It takes anywhere, honestly, from like 10 to 20 minutes to let the icing dry enough to crackle. It really depends just on your environment you're working in and how thick the icing is. In this case, it's a pretty small area, so I'm actually just using the end of my paintbrush. I have a quote-unquote crackle tool that I use. It's actually a fondant tool, but this is such a small area. I wanted a more fine, like a smaller crackle. So that's why I use the end of that paintbrush. Just use something with like a rounded end, not a flat end to it. And after you crack it, like we did here, you do have to let it dry until it's like fairly dry. So give it another, I'd say probably hour, 30 minutes to 60 minutes to dry before you paint it. I was definitely too impatient. I'd say, let's say 60 minutes. This was probably more like 30 because I just like couldn't wait. But there was one point, I don't know if it was on camera or on a different one, where I actually accidentally like pressed into it. Whoops. Like, because the icing underneath is not dry enough. Anywho. Now, you noticed that I'm using a bigger brush here. Would not recommend trying to paint this kind of larger area with that tiny brush we were using before. So get yourself a slightly larger brush. Doesn't need to be huge, but big enough, I wasn't too messy with that painting, but it's just like, it's so much easier and calmer to do it this way. So yeah. Now, putting the flowers on top, just in smushing them together in whatever array that you like, that's what I went for. And then we will go in and flood the section on the bottom. I would say the only or maybe the most annoying thing about doing the flowers the way I did is that you do have to do them in sections, because you can't like flood them all at the same time, because they will just melt into each other. You do want to have definition in between the flowers. So just something to keep in mind. All right, bottom of the cake, beautiful. Are we gonna let that crust? Yes, we are. Okay. And then this is going along with that like simple lines aesthetic. I had originally planned to put like even more flowers on this, but I was like, you know what? This goes with the aesthetic better of the whole set, like just the simple lines. So I went simple, but you can do whatever you want. Putting the little squiggles on top. I swear, like the flowers don't look like flowers until you put the squiggle on top, and then just like magic happens. And we're going to add the little leaves just for the pop of green. The leaf cut is cut in a V, if that makes any sense. It's really hard to like talk about it. I do show it obviously in the class video, and there are pictures of it too and whatnot. Okay, moving on to the heart. So I love this design because it is possibly like the most customizable of all of them. I just did it in a very like simple classic manner. You'll see the design in a minute, but this is a great option that you could add like just about anything to this heart. And I chose a pretty chubby heart, so it's a good surface area to add whatever makes sense for your bride. You can add the initials of the bride and groom, you can add the bride's name, you can write save the date, any other like sort of imagery that makes sense for the bride and groom, whatever. I just love this heart. This little like bubblegum pink heart. She's so cute. So like I mentioned with this set, this is a very specific set of cutters from this cookie cutter company, and they're all very specific sizes. So if you go to take this class or do this set, then you'll be buying the exact sizes that I used. Okay, so we're doing the detail on top, which as I mentioned, is simple and classic. Like this is not a design that I came up with at all. It's been in the cookie world for a long time, like probably 10 years at least. We're going to paint this gold, as you can see. So I did the same technique where I'm piping with the same color as the flood. And there is an art, as I mentioned, to like how much liquid you get on the end of your paintbrush. If you put too much, you will see right away because it's going to pool around the edge of it. And it's very hard to get off the gold once it's on the cookie in any capacity. So I always try to avoid that as much as possible. And again, to make our lives easier, we're going to paint the gold before we put the flower on top. There's eventually going to be a flower on that center, which is why I'm not like concerned about there being too much gold in that center there. I actually had to film this cookie twice because I put the flower on first before painting the gold. And I was like, no. I must teach them the best way to do it. So, this is another instance where like, yeah, the flower could very possibly likely crater, but that doesn't really matter because we're going to put the little squiggle on top and we're going to call it simple, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Okay. Oh, sometimes I just crack myself up. All right, we're adding little leaves at the bottom. Oops. There we go. I like didn't finish it off. So, but this was the very last cookie that I did. So I didn't get to redo it. The last of the heart, I should say. So last but certainly not least is the second iteration of the banner. And this is where I want to show you that you can do something else to customize it. So instead of filling in each individual flag, we're just going to fill in the entire section. Say what? I know. Okay. I just got lost with myself. This peach color, by the way. So the way that I like to make peach is I start with pink and then I add a tiny bit, like I color the icing to pink, and then I add a little bit of yellow until I reach the desired level of peachness. Because peach is somewhere between pink and orange. That's why I add the yellow to it. And we are just flooding away. Love this for us. Using one of my favorite scribes that I always have handy. I always have 3 scribes I'm working with. This is the smaller one of the 3, but actually I didn't know that PME actually makes two different sizes. This is their bigger size, which I like less than the really small one, but the really small one, or like it's really thin metal, it's very sharp, by the way. Okay, so for this iteration, I'm putting the date of the wedding. That's a great use for this particular plaque, or flag, I don't know, banner. But again, like you could put the bride's name, you could put save the date, like there are so many different things that you could write on this. And I chose September 2023, because according to the Knot, I think it's the most popular wedding date this year. It's a Saturday, something, something, something. And the lettering, obviously, this is like a much simpler lettering than the one we did for love. And in the workbook, I give you a practice sheet guides to practice doing simple lettering like this. Whenever I freehand lettering like this, I always start with the middle number or letter, whatever it is. So if like it's easy if there are, an odd number of letters. So if there's 5, you start with the third one in the center, and then I go from center to right and then finish out the left side. It's my best way of just kind of spacing everything out, but if you just want to go from left to right, that's fine. So we're finishing it off with the little flowers, of course, keeping the same like motif throughout the set. Those little hearts are orange because we're going to paint them gold. Did someone already guess that? Yeah. I ran out of space on the left and the right side, as you can see, but I was determined to do those hearts anyway. The heart technique is it's called pressure piping. All right, so we are painting this gorgeous thing gold. And then, whoops, needed a little bit more. Again, I try to get like just the right opaqueness, so I only have to do one layer. And then we're going to finish it off with the leaves, of course. And we're going to watch me pipe in at a very awkward angle. This is great. This is a great angle if you're left-handed, but I am not left-handed. I am right-handed. So that is it, my friends. Oh my goodness. I hope you enjoyed watching this. This set just makes me happy. The colors, the simplicity, the florals, like heart happy, Grace happy. As always, I hope you learned a thing or two. And maybe you'll try this yourself, or maybe you just like listening to my videos and my voice is soothing, and I love that too. So thank you for listening, no matter your reason. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night, wherever you are, and have a sweet one. Bye.